This video is going to cover the spot healing brush and the healing brush. Most photographers are familiar with spot healing brush, but not as familiar with the value of using the healing brush. So I'm going to start out by telling you that there is a printed tutorial that covers all this material, and I've given it to you along with this video, and it will be helpful to you as you use it. I'd like to first point out the location of these tools on whether you're in Elements or in Photoshop. They're very similar in look. So I have up here in front of me a Photoshop CC, and in the tool there is a place which has this image of a little brush with a little loop around it, and it's the spot healing brush. But if you use the little corner icon, it tells you what's hidden under that. And the other one hidden there is the healing brush tool. So the two we will be using are spot healing and healing brush. Let's go and take a look at where those are found in Elements. Very similar. Here is the item, and if you open it, instead of popping it like you do in Photoshop, you simply click on it and the option bar shows you the options. And once again, you have the spot healing brush and you have the healing brush, and they're both located in that place, so that as we change, you will be able to use whichever software you have to do it. I like to mention at this point that it's worthwhile knowing if a tool becomes corrupted and it is not functioning, you can't get a brush to look like a different size, it stays like a little plus mark, and no matter how big you make it, it won't show you the brush size. Those corruptions can be straightened in most cases by going to a place to reset the tool. So I have Elements up here, and in that option bar at the other end are three icons. And the middle one, if you pop it open, has a reset tool. I never reset all tools. It's usually one tool that's a problem. If that doesn't work, then what I need to do is to shut my application, close my computer, restart it, go back to the application, and everything is magically working. But this is one way to reset a tool. If you think you've fooled with it and it's all messed up and you want it like the default purpose, if you reset it, it goes back to the factory default. To reset a tool in Photoshop CC, if you go over to your Tools panel where you click on the tool that's not working properly, and then go up to the tool, the upper option bar where you see the tool, and pop that open. And over at the right is a little gear, and it opens, and with it you'll see some choices including Reset Tool. So it's a little harder to get to than in Elements, but that same is there. And I find I use this when a tool is, mostly I have a problem where I can't set the brush size, it won't show it, or it's just not showing a brush, it's just showing a plus. If somehow or other you know that tool is not working correctly, or if it has been used so many times that you want to go back to the default, then you do reset the tool and you have it like it was. Sometimes we play around with a tool so much that we would just love to get it back to its normal position. So those might be helpful to you. And now I want to show you just very quickly how you set the spot healing brush. And then I have found a little magical thing for it that's worth considering. So if you will go on whichever program you're in, I'm just going to take us back over to Elements. And I want us to get the spot healing brush and look at the option bar. The things that I like to know are that when I use the spot healing brush, I don't want to work directly on the background, so I make a neutral transparent layer above the background, and then the tool, you must be sure it says sample all layers, and if it doesn't, you have to when you have it and you're using it, you want to be sure it samples all layers, and that is set for content aware, which is the newest way of using it. If you are working on the spot healing brush, you also want to be sure that it samples all layers, and that the aligned I will talk about, but I do not use the aligned tool because quite often in the way I'm going to show you, you want to be able to sample from one small good area and keep returning to that area for sample. You don't want every time you click for it to change and move. The aligned option I usually have unchecked. So let's go and open one image and show you. You're aware that the most common way we use this is to get rid of the remains of dust spots on your sensor. That if you notice that the ceiling of beautiful blue sky has a little soft gray spot in it, it's probably a spot of dust on your sensor, and it was transferred where you could see it on a clear blue sky. So if you have a sensor that is dirty and you haven't cleaned it and you're stuck, then you use the spot healing brush and it completely removes that by replacing it with the sky all around the spot. But I'm going to show you kind of a unique way of using it. So if you will go to File, Open, and in that you will find the Bruce Spot Healing Brush file. And if you will open that into your software, here's a picture that I took at the Bruce Peninsula in Canada. And I liked the foreground photographers, but I was bothered by the ones in the midground toward the back. They were just not adding anything to the picture. And I wondered if I could get rid of them. And I got rid of them with a different use of this tool than I am used to. I tried Content Aware, which is how we normally use it. It didn't work at all. And by moving it back to Proximity Match, which is one of the types, and I sampled all layers and I created that blank layer. I then put it around it and I showed the surrounding pixels, and I simply clicked. And what it took was it looked all around it and replaced it with what it found. And when I did that with the Content Aware, it just could not find what I wanted. So there are some times when you can use something different, but that was quite amazing. I'll go and remove the layer so you see the before and after. You see? Now, if you look picky right now, you might go back and touch up the areas. But for the general use that I had, where that's the background, no one's going to focus on it. Once I got rid of those photographers, I had a picture that was what I wanted. And again, if you use a spot healing brush and it doesn't do it, sometimes you redo it, use it again. But sometimes you can just clean it up more specifically with the clone stamp tool until you have what you want. I thought it was worth showing this because it's one of the only uses I've found for the proximity match. Normally, Content Aware certainly will do the job on the dust bits that are there. And so I want most of my time to be spent on the healing brush because I think that's the one most people don't use because they aren't aware how to use it. I'm going to close this and not save it. And if you do that playing with it, you'll keep it as a sample to play with. Okay? So at this point, I would like you to come to find out what's different about the healing brush. And so if you will go into the same folder we just had, File, Open, and you'll find that healing brush example, that bright blue and red JPEG, if you'll open that. If I were to clone with this, you know what would happen. I would pick up one side, and when I put it on the other, it would be exactly like it was when I picked it up. Cloning takes exactly what you've done and allows you to put it somewhere else. There's times when that's very valuable. But this is a new tool, and I want you to see what the difference is. So I'm going to go in that area where the spot healing brush was, but I'm going to click over on just the healing brush. And it says sample all layers, and for that reason, I am going to add this layer. It's a good habit to get in when you're doing any cloning or healing to work on an independent layer. You can make all the mistakes you want, delete that layer, and you're back to try again. So I have that, and I have sampled the layers. The aligned is actually not important, but I leave it off. The only time I would use aligned is if I was trying to copy a plaid and I had to match the pattern and keep having the pattern grow. But that's not how I use it normally. So I tend to leave aligned unchecked. So now you've got your tool. I'm going to make it pretty big so you can really see it. And I'm going to pick up a bit of the blue textured side, and I'm going to then paste it over the red side. So I hold the Alt or Option key because the healing brush you have to sample. It isn't like spot healing, which does its own sampling. So I hold the Alt or Option and I click. I then lift the Alt or Option. I come over here and I paste it and move it away. And what it did was it brought the texture over, but it matched that texture with the background where you're placing it. To see how it works in the reverse, take the tool back and start on the red side. Hold the Alt or Option, click. Lift the Alt or Option and paste that over the blue. And you kept the texture, which is smooth, and it blended itself into the background of that spot. So this gives us some potential in working with repairing portraits where we have very heavy shadows and need to diminish the shadows around wrinkles. You know, when you take a picture of a person, unless you have a studio with all these indirect lighting, you tend to create shadows around any indentation in the skin. And those shadows make the wrinkles much more apparent. So I'm just going to close this, and you can, if you're practicing, you can close it and don't save it. Leave it as a good place to practice with. So instead, what I'm going to do is take for you an example of working on wrinkles. And I have two images. File, open, in that same folder. The Portrait Healing Wrinkles is a picture of Tim Gray that he provided and I'm enjoying using. And I've also volunteered myself. So you can open both the Portrait Healing Wrinkles and ML Headshot and open it. If you put them so they're both tabbed, go to Window, Images, Consolidate to Tabs. You'll know there are two images there. We're going to start on the Portrait Healing that has Tim Gray in it. It's an excellent one, and he provided it himself as an example of the healing brush, and I think it's really quite good. So you can see what happened here. The light that was shining on that face caused extra shadows in the wrinkles. And those wrinkles are much more apparent here than if you were looking at Tim. Because if you don't have a harsh light, you won't pick up the indentation shadow. So what we're going to do is take one of those and show you how you can just lighten it enough that it's not so predominant. And the easiest one for me to get to is the one over on this side of his face. So I'm going to add a new layer like I like to do. I'm going to have the healing brush. And down here, it says Sample All Layers. And it doesn't have aligned. It isn't too critical here the way I'm going to work, but that's my normal way of using it. And then I'm going to zoom in on that part of his face so it's easy to see what I'm working on. And I'm going to pick up the skin from this side and put it over the wrinkle. Don't be surprised when you see there's two steps to this process. So healing brush I have. Oh wait, I need to bring it down. I want it to be just about the right size to cover that up. So I go to the right, and remember the healing brush requires that you make a sample. Alt Option, click. Then lift your Alt Option and paste it over the wrinkle. Now, well, that looks lovely, except I don't want to completely get rid of the character in his face. So all I have to do is go up to that layer's opacity slider, which is at 100% by default. If I hold my mouse and drag the word opacity, I lower the opacity till I get about the right amount for what I think looks normal. And again, do I want to know the before and after? I go to the layer I'm working on and I hide the layer and bring it back. I did a very slight. If I look at it and think, oh, I brought too much of it back, I raise the opacity a little bit. I often end up close to 50%. It depends on the depth of that and how much you think would bring it to a normal one. Remember, you're getting rid of the shadow that the light created in that part of the face. You can, if you're working at home, you can take the time to go through and work on the other side. If I'm working over here, I'm going to sample from on the outside here. I'm going to cover it up, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity. So this is the technique. If you wanted to do the same, you can do it anywhere you see a deep shadow in a crease. So I'm just going to close this one and not save it. It's for you to play with. And then I'll bring myself up. And I would like to have a little less predominant, and I want you to know where the wrinkles are most noticeable is where light created a shadow. That those aren't nearly as noticeable otherwise. But to work on them, I need to zoom in, take your zoom tool, and come over and zoom in on the side of the place that shows these. And I'm at 200%. I'm only going to go to 100%. It's big enough to work with. And so I have to say, where is their skin without wrinkles that that has the same basic lighting? So I'm going to be sampling from this area and pasting it over these. Now here's the reason why you don't want your align checked. I don't have much good skin to take from, so I'm going to sample from that same area every time I work on these creases. Therefore, I don't want it to follow me as I work. I want to lift my mouse and find out I'm sampling from the same place. That's what it does. So I have to get that healing brush tool. I have to be sure a line is not checked. I have to add a layer to work on and be sure it's sampling all layers. And so we will go and try and see what happens when I sample. Well, how big do I want? Well, I've got to stay in that area. Might be a little bigger. And I've got to pick it up, and I'm going to drag here. But you see, I can't keep dragging or I'll pick up more wrinkles. So I have to be aware of where the sample is. So I grab the sample, I come over here, and you see the plus sign that tells me where it's picking up? I let go, and then if I continue to go, it's back up where it started. With good sample, come over to here. It goes back up in the good area. And I can keep doing that. If I don't go too far at any one time and I stay in that good area, I can carefully remove the problem that I'm trying to get rid of here. But you must watch your sample point, because if you end up going too far out of one drag, you'll get out of the good sample area and you'll have to undo. Well, I'm not going to necessarily work on this whole thing. But what it did was, it left the underlying tones and it replaced them with the texture from the better area. That's exactly what we saw in our little sample example of the blue textured area and the smooth red. So it obviously doesn't look normal to me. So I'm going to right away hit that opacity slider and lower it. And as I lower it, some of that's going to return. And I found somewhere around 50%. Gives me some texture in that skin, but it gets rid of the predominant wrinkles. So if I test it out by hiding the layer, you can see what I've done. Now, I'm not done with that. If you were really working on this, I would work a little further on down into this area here. And again, since it isn't changing the light and dark areas as much as it is changing the surface texture, it isn't quite as critical. It's not like cloning where you have to have a perfect spot to pick up pixels if you're going to get the right results. I would then continue working over here. And if I really wanted to, I could work on this part down on my neck. But all I wanted you to see was the process. You pick up a good texture and you put it over the texture you don't like. And you're very careful to watch your plus sign so you don't drag out of the good area. So that gives you the result of doing that. It's very helpful where you have lighting that you don't have good control over. Many of us don't have a studio with indirect lighting and all kinds of nice things. We're straight on lighting on people, and you will get sections where you want to correct them. So I'm just going to close that. And don't save it, because it's there for you to practice on.